Well, the big news right now is Parliament resuming after 5 months. King Charles arriving in Canada and speaking at the throne speech. We're going to jump right into what was said, what it means, and what Canadians are thinking about it with Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley. Brian, hello, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, Brian, King Charles is in Canada, of course, delivering the speech from the throne today. And a lot of chatter about this, that it's being shown as a strength, a sign of strength, I guess. So, we've seen some competing polls on that issue, though. So, what do Canadians actually think about this?
It depends on who you ask and what question you're asking. A poll by Pollara, a Toronto firm, asked, is it a good thing that the king is reading the speech from the throne? And on that, not the majority, but the plurality, about 45% said yes. Liberals more excited about the king reading the speech from the throne than supporters of any other party, obviously, because it's a liberal government and the liberal government is lenient into it. I guarantee you, if it was a conservative government and this were happening, conservatives would be the most supportive of this and liberals less so. So, it's always a bit of which side do I support, plays into all of this. But the Angus Reid Institute asked a different set of questions, and the overwhelming majority just said, I don't care. Uh, it was only about 12% in Alberta said they were excited about the king reading the speech from the throne. The high was about 21% here in Ontario, and then up and down across the country. So the connection between Canada and the monarchy is not as strong as it used to be. In fact, even the Governor General's office put out a post on social media saying this is a great coming together of our two nations, and had a British flag and a Canadian flag. Well, no, King Charles, when he's here, is the King of Canada. He's not representing a foreign country. He is representing Canada. And the Governor General's office, which should know this, I'm not saying everyone watching needs to know that, but the Governor General's office should know that and understand it. And even they clearly don't. So I don't think the ties with the monarchy are as great as they once were.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting even for our viewers to know that, I think. And I believe it's been a couple of years since Charles has been here, and I think maybe even longer, because I think this is the first time since he was actually made king, right?
Yeah, first time since he's been king, but he's come fairly regularly, and it was an interesting little bit in the speech from the throne that obviously came from him and not the prime minister's office, where he mentioned that every time he comes to Canada, a bit more of the country enters his veins and goes straight to his heart. So,
Ah.
I've covered him on past visits, and I can tell you, he's an impressive guy. I remember once him. I got very up close, and he was at the National War Memorial, where he laid a wreath today at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And he's speaking with a number of veterans, and he didn't need to be giving them his time. He chose to, and he leaned in, and you could tell that he was actually listening. You talk to some people who are mucky mucks, and they're looking past you. He leaned in, and gave them his full attention, and that's when I said, "Huh, I can get on board with this guy."
That is really neat. When is the last time that a monarch read the speech from the throne? Do you know, Brian?
I believe it was 1977, and before that, it was in the 1950s. And prior to that, they really didn't visit Canada.
Yeah, so this is significant. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think the
Yes.
average person on the street is pretty indifferent to the fact that he read it, but I think most people would be like, oh, cool, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's about it. So, Brian, ahead of the speech from the throne, there was apparently a lot of back and forth on what could be said and what could not be said. So, why is there a difference when the monarch is reading the speech?
Because the monarch is supposed to stay above the fray of politics. Now, so should the governor general.
Mm.
But you know, over the years, that is corroded, and so when it's just the governor general, we can put in some partisan language here. We can be very political. Well, the king's office worked closely with the prime minister's office in finalizing the speech, and the king's office was very clear: nothing partisan. I mean, they still talked about all kinds of things that the government wants to do, things the government promised to do, but there could not be a partisan shot, say, at the Conservatives or the New Democrats, or you're not going to have King Charles read out something that could be taken as an insult to President Donald Trump down in Washington. So that's why it's a bit different than usual. It is how it always should be, But as I said, when it's the governor general or provincially a lieutenant governor, governments will push the envelope a bit, but they dare not with the king here.
Okay, so maybe let's get into some of the details. So, what were the key takeaways from this speech today, Brian?
Well, if you paid attention during the election, you know what was said. This was essentially a rundown of Mark Carney and the Liberals' election promises and platforms read out with a very distinguished British accent. So maybe it sounded a bit more regal. He talked about building infrastructure projects. I'm sure that is something that everyone in Alberta's ears perked up at and said, oh, yeah, we want to hear more about that. Well, not a lot of details. It's not like they said, and we'll approve a new version of Northern Gateway or revive Energy East. But they did talk about natural or national infrastructure projects, did mention conventional energy, but still doesn't seem to like to utter the words oil or gas. I know it's the king reading it, but the speech comes from the prime minister and his team. Oil and gas not mentioned, but conventional energy, which is how he's describing it, that was mentioned. A good chunk on defense and Canada's sovereignty, including Canada joining Rearm Europe, a program the European Union has started, and one that there's going to be a lot of money spent. Well, are we going to be buying ammunition and defense supplies from the Europeans, or will we be selling to them? All that remains to be seen. But a lot of discussion of what was talked about during the election campaign, including dental program and a GST reduction. Yeah, I'm sure that King Charles is very well versed in the intricacies of the GST. I'm not making fun of him here. It's just odd to hear a monarch talk about a reduction or a change in the goods and services
Yes,
tax.
I agree with you. I caught that too, and I thought it was a little funny. I think I even chuckled a little bit. Okay, so getting away from that, the first thing the House of Commons did when the MPs finally returned to Ottawa for the first time in nearly 5 months was elect a speaker. So, Brian, why did the Conservatives who wanted to run drop out? And also, is it a good or bad thing that the Liberal MP Francis Scarpaleggia defeated fellow Liberal Greg Fergus for this job?
I think it's a very good thing that Francis Scarpaleggia defeated Greg Fergus because Greg Fergus, in my view, was very bad at being speaker. The speaker is supposed to be the impartial referee. They're supposed to, put it in baseball terms if you want, they're just there to call balls and strikes. Or in hockey, they're in the striped jersey, there to make sure both teams are playing a fair game. Um, Greg Fergus let his liberal partisanship show too often when he was in the role. Very disappointing. I knew Greg Fergus before he was elected, always knew him to be a good stand up man. He just was not made for that role. It didn't work out for him. Francis Scarpaleggia is someone who's been an MP since 2004. I think I met him around that time when he was first elected. I do not mean this, and so Speaker Scarpaleggia, if you're watching, this is not an insult. For your new job, this is a compliment. He's boring, and that's good. Okay, you don't want the speaker being the showy person, the flashy person. We had one of those in the UK a few years ago, and he'd yell out order in this really dramatic way. The show was all about him. As I said, the speaker should be quiet and in the background, not taking away from the prime minister or the leader of the opposition or the various MPs speaking. You shouldn't notice them until they're making a ruling. And if they're making a ruling, hopefully it's fair. As for why the Conservative dropped out, I think there was a good chance that Chris d'Entremont, who's from Nova Scotia, I thought he could have won. I thought the Liberals would have backed him. It would have been good for the Liberals, take a Conservative vote off of the table. They need fewer votes to pass anything contentious. And I think that's why the Conservatives said, you know what? If you're on our team, we don't want you running for Speaker because that will put us in a bad position. We're not going to be seeing confidence votes anytime soon, but I think they just wanted to send the message. The Liberals look like they were going to get close to a de facto majority. They'll rule as if they have one, but with some of these recounts happening and seats flipping, they're down to 169 seats, 168 once you take the speaker out of the equation, because they're not voting unless there's a tie.
All right. Now, MPs won't get down to real business until Wednesday. Then they sit for a few weeks before leaving for the summer recess until September 15th. Must be nice. So, weren't we told that there was a crisis? So, why are they sitting? Like, why are they not sitting through the summer?
Uh, Traditionally, MPs did not sit through the summer because it was unbearable in Ottawa. It's an old building. Center Block is an old building. It dates to 1921. West Block, where they're sitting now, dates to the 1800s. There's no air conditioning. It's
Wow, that's hard to
stupidly,
believe.
stupidly humid in Ottawa. Well, now that they're sitting in West Block, it's a newly reconstructed chamber for the House of Commons, while Center Block is being renovated for uh, how I think it's taken a full decade. Uh, there's air conditioning there. They could sit. Let me tell you, sitting in the depths of an Ottawa heat wave, you would be sweltering in the old House of Commons. So that's traditionally why they didn't sit. You go back to your riding for the summer. And by the way, they are still working when they're at the riding. It's just different. But if we are in this crisis, and this was the most consequential election of our lifetimes, yeah, they should sit for the summer. Now, they always take off around Canada Day, and of course, the Quebec MPs have to be back for Saint Jean Baptiste Day on June 25th, or as they call it in Quebec, the national holiday. But I've covered them once or twice when they have come back, I think just once in 20 years, where they did come back after Canada Day to tidy up some things. They could sit through July, pass a budget, pass some important things that need done. Anyways, they're not doing it, so it doesn't seem like it is the kind of crisis that you need Parliament for anyway.
Right, but you think, like, especially when the country hasn't had parliament in 5 months, basically no government, you think it would be more
And
crucial for
remember,
them this point in time.
before that, Jeanette, from September, late September until December, they did no government business because of the showdown over the Green Slush Fund.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a year almost when you really put into that. You mentioned there that you've covered it before, so I know you spent a lot of time on Parliament Hill. So, what are some of the perks that come with that job? That's interesting.
The speaker, um, that's fascinating. The speaker, you get an apartment um, in the well, it used to be right adjacent to the chamber. I don't know where it is now in
Does it
this,
have air
during this
conditioning?
renovation, yeah. Oh, it does, but the big chamber did not. You get an apartment there, and that's because they used to sit from 9 in the morning until midnight, and if there was a big marathon session,
Oh boy.
the speaker had to be there, so they might need to go take a nap, and so they have an apartment there. They have a farm just across the Ottawa River on the Quebec side. Used to belong to William Lyon Mackenzie King. Um, Beautiful grounds, beautiful old home. You get a car and driver, you get extra staff, you have a great entertainment budget because that's part of the speaker's role. Foreign dignitaries come, foreign delegations, you're there to entertain them. There's a tradition of having your own speaker's whiskey. Either some have had scotch, some have had a Canadian whiskey, but it's something that you not only serve, but you present as a gift to visitors. So it's got to tell you, having toured the house, been to some events out at the farm, it's a pretty sweet gig.
Yeah, like sweet gig for the speaker. Those weren't necessarily your perks, being able to work
Oh,
on
my, no,
Parliament
not my perks. Being able
Hill.
to see everything,
That's
um,
amazing. Mhm.
oh, just being able to see it all and be in the middle of it. Now, of course, I was there when the Commons and the Senate were next door to each other, and so the usher of the Black Rod had to just walk down the hall and invite them down. Today, they had to get into little buses and shuttle down to the Senate because it's so far away. Just for time's sake, it was that's what they needed to be doing. It's about a 10-minute walk away.
Yeah, no, interesting. Okay, so there was a profile piece on Mark Carney recently that saw a lot of people complimenting him because it described him as punctual, he knows his files, he wants and he expects results. But you, Brian, said that Canadians should not be giving Mark Carney credit for these traits. Why not?
Because they should be expected. I'm not saying these aren't good things, but my point is Justin Trudeau lowered the bar so low that we hear that someone's punctual and we're like, oh, that's great. Oh, they know their files. Wow, amazing. this is how it should work. This is what you should expect from a prime minister. A prime minister should be a serious person. Justin Trudeau showed again at the speech from the throne that he's not. He was there, he was seated next to Stephen Harper, the two former prime ministers in attendance. I didn't see Jean Chrétien there, but he he shows up in a suit and suede green Adidas running shoes. When he was prime minister, he was interested in his Instagram account and showing off his socks and performative statements. He wasn't interested in governing. You need a government. It's good that Mark Carney's punctual. It's good that he's expecting results. I was talking with an Ottawa insider today who said there will be a cabinet shuffle within the year because he is going to demand that these people do things and be competent, and some of them just aren't.
Well, it's a
But
good
we
thing in
should
a leader.
expect that.
Yes.
We should expect it.
Exactly. Brian, unfortunately, we're out of time here, but appreciate having you on once again. Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.